Lesson 9, Part 1. Magic works. We can assume that this is true until a time when experience allows us to say not that we assume magic works, not that we believe magic works, but that we know magic works. If this is not true, then you are wasting your time reading this course. Obviously, I do not think that this is so, for as a result of over 20 years of experience, I know that magic works. To briefly repeat some information from an earlier lesson, the magical tradition holds that the source of all created laws under which we all must live. One such law is gravity. We cannot jump high enough to escape gravity's grip on us, however. Once we understand gravity, we can build rockets with enough thrust to lift us beyond gravity's hold. There are many laws which were unknown only 100 years ago. This includes the laws concerning the weak and strong atomic forces, laws which are a basis of modern physics. Similarly, there are other laws which are still not commonly known. Among these are the laws of magic. Either these laws are valid and true, or they are not true natural laws. Either there is gravity or there is not gravity. There is no in between. Likewise, either the laws of magic are valid or they are not. There cannot be any type of rule saying that sometimes they are valid and other times, under identical conditions, they are invalid. Remember, magic is an art and science, and a basic tenet of science is that under the same conditions, an experiment will always have the same result. Now put this idea on the back burner for a moment while I discuss art. Not the art of magic, mind you, but the art of motion pictures, fictional novels, and short stories. You've read them or seen the films. The wizard casts a spell and out of the mists appears a demon to do the wizard's dirty work. One of the best examples of such a film is a rare and black and white movie called Night of the Demon by Jacques Tourneur. Also look at the Faust with Burton and Taylor. Read some of the stories by H.P. Lovecraft, who makes Poe sound like Irma Bombeck. Look also at Doctor Strange comic books. I'm sure you can think of many more films and stories which have a hero or villain summoning up creatures from some astral netherworld. And in all honesty, wouldn't you like to do that as well? Wouldn't you like to have the powers to summon up some ghastly beastie to control people, help your friends, and punish those who have hurt you? The possibility of doing that is one of the reasons my interest in magic was maintained over my few years of study. If only I could find the right book or teacher, I could have the powers of the universe on my grasp. Needless to say, had such a thing happened to me, my karma would be in an awful state. Further, my mystical leanings have led me away from the desire to control others. But still, wouldn't it be nice to evoke a being to our plane of existence just once? The movies and books and stories I had read greatly influenced me. Taking that influence and combining it with my understanding that magic works led me to totally ignore a very useful grimoire, that part of the Lesser Key of Solomon published as the Goetia. In the Goetia, at the end of the first conjuration to call forth any of the spirits listed in the book, it says, "If the spirit comes not yet, say as followeth." Then the book gives another summoning or evocation conjuration at the end, which it says, "If he come not yet at the rehearsal of these two first conjurations, but without doubt he will, say on as followeth." This is followed by commands rather than requests for appearance, commands which are filled with the followed by a series of curses. To me, this did not make sense. If all entities in the universe could follow certain cosmic laws, they must appear when they are called, otherwise magic would not be science, nor there could be no such a thing as a magical system. Obviously, something must be missing. In my studies of this and other ancient grimoires, I've learned that virtually none of the grimoires, the ancient texts on magic, were complete. A student was not expected to learn magic from a book, rather books were meant to be guidelines for the student to give in written form those items which could not be quickly memorized nor repeated so frequently that rote memorization would occur. So what are the things that which are not included in the ancient texts? First, you must have a positive attitude. You must know that magic you are doing is going to work. This does not mean that magic is nothing more than a medical practice. You are alienating a doctor to give you medicine. but unless you really wish to get better, there may be a much longer healing period, and in fact, you might not heal at all. This is a mental will to live, which can affect you on the physical plane. Likewise, the knowledge that your magic will succeed will affect all planes. If you think it won't work, it won't. Again, this is not because magic is all mental, but because part of doing magic is having the right mental attitude. Two other parts of magic which are not included in the grimoires are the ability to raise energy and control it. This has always been a major focus of magical studies, and a student would have practice for hours. He would know where in a ritual the energy should be raised and how it should be directed. Thus, these three things need to be included in any book on magic. The student was supposed to know these things. That is why all ancient grimoires are purposefully incomplete. It took me several years to realize something to which I had never paid attention. There is a version of the translation of the Sefer Yetzirah by Mordell which states that the Yod-He-Vav-He of the Tetragrammaton may be a code for duplicated of other letters. Also, a friend pointed out to me that witches, she is a Wiccan, frequently used codes in their Book of Shadows, books which contain their rituals and instructions. As an example, baby's blood was a code for strawberry juice. Thus, if Witch's Book of Shadows fell into the hands of an uninitiated person, that person might be too scared or too offended to try out any information in said book. Unfortunately, the books sometimes fell into the possessions of people who actually believed what they read, and a history of torture and death is one of the results of this. I don't remember the exact day, but I suddenly had a flash of intuition and realized that the grimoires had codes so that idiots like myself and some years ago wouldn't get into trouble doing things for which they were not prepared. I realized that the secrets of magical evocation were not in the grimoires, or if they were in code. I had to solve this mystery. Like others, I had so many questions. Why did sources call for more than one person to do an evocation? Why is there a circle drawn inside the triangle where the entity manifests? How do the pentacles for magical evocation work? Why does incense of a particular scent draw entities from other levels of existence to the physical plane? If it is because they like the astral form of the incense has some claim, they could stay on the astral plane and enjoy it without having to materialize. There were too many questions and no answers. Then one day a friend who was a very knowledgeable occultist made a passing remark about the foolishness of those who thought that magical evocation rarely happened. He said that they are wrongly believed that entities were only drawn to the local area of the astral plane so that they could be more easily dealt with. Naturally, he had never done any evocations of any sort himself, and I laughed, too, until I started to do some research and discovered that 3 Karauli originated groups, one now defunct, believed and practiced magical evocations only to the astral plane. I found a book, Secret Magic Revealed, by 2 excellent occultists, Nelson and Ann White, who agree with this idea. Finally, really making my understanding sure, I read In Aspects of Occultism by Dion Fortune. In the great majority of cases of evocation magic, the form is built up on the astral, can only actually be seen by the clairvoyant, though any sensation person can feel its influence. The initiated magician is usually, unless engaged in some special experiment or research, content to evoke to visible appearance on the astral. Depending upon his psychic powers for communication with the entity evoked, he does not go to the trouble to evoke to visible appearance on the physical because, if he is an adequate psychic, astral appearance serves his purpose just as well. In fact, better, because it is more congenial to the nature of the beings, as and places less limitations upon their activities. Certain substances can be used to induce physical manifestations. Fortune adds that of these substances, the principal one is fresh blood. Excreta can be used for the same purpose. However, their ability to give off ectoplasm from which those entities can create a physical appearance wears off by the time the body heat has dispersed. This corresponds with the tantric belief that semen, loses its magical potency within 15 minutes after ejaculation. Since this course is an introduction to ceremonial magic, we will not be going into the study of evoking entities into the physical plane, and there will be no instructions for blood sacrifices on these pages. But will the idea of evocation only to the astral plane answer the question we have? Let's go through some of them and see. 1. Are the grimoires lying or in code when they say that by the ritual in them you can evoke a being or entity into the physical plane? Neither, because they don't say that. They merely say that you can evoke an entity to physical appearance so that you can see them. Certainly this can and does include seeing them on the astral plane. 2. Why are there usually at least 2 people present when doing a magical evocation? So that one can perform the ritual and the other can act as a seer into the astral plane. 3. Why, in the Goetia, is a circle drawn within triangles wherein entities are supposed to manifest? Because this is where a circular magic mirror is placed. In this mirror, the seer may look to the aid in being able to see on the astral plane. It is a physical doorway to the astral plane. 4. How do the pentacles for magical evocation work? The seer contemplates them during the ritual. They set the seer's mind in a state receptive to particular entities. Number 5. Why do entities like a particular incense? Whether or not they enjoy it is irrelevant. The scent affects the seer and helps put the seer in a physical receptive state. 6. Finally, what is the need to call an entity over and over? Shouldn't they obey on the first call, or, if your magic is correct, yes. If our theory of magic is correct, they need only be called once. Unfortunately, the minds of humans are not easily controlled. The seer may need large doses of incense, many moments of contemplating the pentacles, and frequent repetition of the evocations to open his or her psychic visions to the level of the astral plane wherein an entity has to come to do the magician's bidding. The fact of the matter is that if we assume that magical evocation brings entities to communication with us on the astral plane rather than on the physical plane, it virtually solves all of our questions. It will also answer the question you may have had as to how I could teach you how to evoke entities to visible appearance without summoning up anything into the physical plane. I have spent several pages sharing how I learned this magical secret and how it answered all of my questions. When you first started taking this course, you may have thought if you said a few words or waved a magic wand, something you desired would instantly occur. But now you should know, hopefully by experience, that magic takes time and occurs through total natural means. Similar, it is the time to disabuse yourself of the false notion that if everything is done correctly, demons will rise out of the haze to do on in your enemies. It is time to learn to ignore the fantasies of those who write or make films of occult fiction but have never practiced even one magical ritual. In all likelihood, they do not even believe in the possibility that magic exists. Before going on with this lesson, go back over the first part and read it again. However, this sane and logical explanation of magical evocation reasonably resolves all questions concerning the theory of this subject. The material which is going to be represented in this lesson will not take you into someone else's fantasy. Rather, it will send you on your own adventure, an adventure which will lead you to the deepest levels of magic and the highest levels of spirituality. Part 2. As you have noted, I have consistently used the term evocation in the discussion of the type of magic being presented in this lesson. In your readings, you may have noticed that there are some authors who use invocation as a synonym of evocation. This error is never made by real magicians, and is only presented by writers who either have no practical magical experience or by those who wish to blur the distinctions of different types of magical practices. This blurring is usually done in an attempt to make all forms of magical work seem the same in order to cast negative aspirations on all magic. If you have been doing the work of this course, you will find evocation magic very safe. Its purpose is to allow you to communicate with other intelligences, powers, or entities which do not exist on our physical plane. Some people contend that we are only communicating with aspects of our subconscious, which are normally hidden. Whether or not this is so, I do not know or care. This is because evocation magic functions as if one is dealing with other entities, and no matter the source, is treated as if one is dealing with external intelligences. I've seen many serious problems develop after the use of invocatory magic by those who are not competent in magic. Invocation is the magical act wherein you allow your body to be temporarily shared by another entity. This is sometimes known as channeling. As long as your banishings are properly done and the magician chooses whom to allow to join in the use of the magician's body, there is no danger. It is when there is little thought or control in the magician's act that problems occur. I have been to many Wiccan rituals where the aspects of divinity called generically the god and the goddess have been successfully and safely invoked. It is quite a remarkable transformation, as the facial characteristics of the people onto whom the god and goddess are invoked, usually the high priest and high priestess, and even the body's carriage sometimes seems to alter and give a far more regal appearance than the normal daily appearance of these people. Done properly, this magical procedure is quite safe and quite thrilling. It should always be done with positive entities, or, if you prefer, positive aspects of our subconscious, and never with unknown or negative entities, i.e. those who might give suggestions which, if followed, would increase or burden the negative karma. There are two instances when invocation or channeling can be dangerous, or at least very anti-productive. The first is when you perform no banishings and invite absolutely any entity to share your body. Certainly from your readings and practice and thoughts about magic, you can see just how dangerous this could be. Yet a whole religion has developed based on this magical act. This religion is known as spiritualism or spiritism. Most practicing occultists tend to frown on the practices of spiritism because it allows virtually any entity to communicate with the living. Just because something, usually a very low astral entity, more on this in a later lesson, says it is the Uncle Charlie, doesn't mean it's so. There have been instances of damage in seances caused by these low elementals, and some mediums have ended their lives as alcoholics. Furthermore, just because Uncle Charlie died doesn't mean he got any smarter. Yet many people change their lives because of the messages given by entities claiming to be deceased relatives or friends. Please understand that I am not condemning the religion of spiritism nor its philosophy. Certainly everyone is entitled to their own religious beliefs, nor am I condemning invocatory magic such as that from which seances borrow. What I am condemning is the lack of preparation, lack of protection, and blind acceptance of frequently wrong or valueless information. If you think this is unjust, look at the hundreds of books published by channeled writers, not all of whom are spiritualists, but who have taken their techniques from spiritists, who claim to have the real writings of people such as Einstein, Tesla, Fermi, and Edison. In thousands of pages and millions of words, not one thing has ever been presented which could revolutionize life or could not be learned from previous information. And I have not mentioned the self-deception and outright fraud which has been a part of modern spiritism since its inception in the middle of the last century. The second instance of danger occurring in this type of magic is if a negative entity is invoked. One of the most fascinating stories concerning Aleister Crowley is how he allowed the demon Coronzon to be invoked into his body. Once invoked, the demon tried to attack Crowley's assistant using numerous ploys. Some people believe that Crowley's successes began to diminish after this because, perhaps, Coronzon was never properly banished. Invocation is a very important part of magic, but for safety, it must be done correctly. This will be covered at a later time, but now after discussing the difference between evocation and invocation, we turn our attention back to the former and see how it is done. This will show us how to use two of the most commonly available grimoires, the Goetia and the Greater Key of Solomon. On the following page, you will see a diagram of a magical circle and triangle of the art wherein entities appear. It is derived from the commonly available edition of the Goetia. Why is there a circle within the triangle of the art? Understand that this drawing is actually a kneaded up version of the original for publication. This was done either by the unlisted translator Mathers or the editor Crowley. Both are uncredited in the most commonly available edition of the book. On page 380 is a copy of the original manuscript which shows the diagram. Other than being much sloppier, my guess is that it is a page from a student's notebook. The important thing to notice is that the circle within the triangle of the art could easily be filled in as shown. It indicates the presence of a magical mirror. Magical mirrors are not shiny silver, rather they are dark black. Here are the instructions for making a magic mirror for use in invocating magic. 1. Although heavy cardboard can be used, a better idea would be to use 3/8 an inch to 1/2 an inch polywood and cut out an equilateral, equal angular triangle. That means, as in the first diagram, the length of each side is equal and each angle of the triangle is exactly 60 degrees. Undercoat it and paint it flat, not glossy white, using flat black paint. Paint in the Greek names of God along the border of the wood, not outside as misdrawn in the diagram. Using flat red paint, write in the archangelic name Magickal, pronounced Magickal, to seal and protect this work as a flat, sometimes called satin, clear finish such as varathane. Notice that I did not specify a length for each side of the triangle. This is because the side will depend upon the amount of room you have available. About the smallest size you would want to use is 1.5 feet per side. Over about 4 to 5 feet, there will be too many light-caused reflections in your magic mirror. This, as you will see, is an undesirable situation. 2. Unless you are good at glass cutting and have a circular cutter, go to a store which sells glass and have them cut a flat disc for you. The diameter of this disc will depend upon the size of your triangle. It should not cover any of the lettering, although it can be smaller than the diagram indicates. About 4 inches is the smallest, which is easy to use. On the big end, 1.5 to 2 feet in diameter is about the maximum. Warning: be very careful when handling cut glass. It will have some edges which are rather sharp and could seriously cut you. Until it is mounted, I urge that you wear gloves when handling it. This is true even if you can find a store which has pre-cut circular pieces of glass which has fused edges, which are not sharp. When you have a glass disc, place it under running water and purify it, as was done with talismans. It is so small enough that it can be done in a sink. Larger pieces will need use of a steam bathtub or shower. Be very careful. Next, dry the piece of glass thoroughly with a clean, soft cloth. Place the glass down on several sheets of newspaper or a drop cloth. Make sure that the topmost side is totally dry and free of lint and water spots. Spray paint this side with flat, black paint. The best paint to use for this is paint designed for masking and making blackboards. However, any flat black paint which will adhere to glass will do. Apply several light coats according to the instructions on the paint. On the last magic mirror I made, I used 13 coats of paint. Excess paint will not hurt, but too little paint will. Allow plenty of time for the paint to dry, then turn your mirror over and see if there is any paint on the other side. If so, remove it with a paint remover, a paint scraper, or razor blade. Again, be careful not to cut yourself or scrap the surface of the glass. Wearing soft gloves, now hold the glass up to a light source and see if any light at all can pass through the magic mirror. If it cannot, you have been successful. 3. The final step of the construction is to mount the mirror on the triangle of wood. The best way to do this is to get the mirror mount at a hardware store. These are L-shaped pieces of metal or plastic with a screw or nail going through one of the bars of the L. Once screwed into the wood, it can be pivoted so that the other bar of the L is toward the center of the glass. This holds the mirror in place. If the mounts are turned away from the center, the mirror may be removed. You will need to use at least 3 of these mirror mounts with one toward each center of the triangle of the art. However, the bigger the glass, the more mounts you should use for safety. Once mounted, paint the mounts flat black using a small brush. If you cannot find these mounts, nails driven into the wood at various points along the circumference of the mirror will do. Of course, the nails should be painted flat black, of course. It is also to make very clear that the side of the glass which is painted black should be against the wood of the triangle. In other words, if you are looking at the triangle with the mirror mounted, the unpainted side of the glass should be towards you, and the painted side should be the far side of the glass. This will have the effect of making the black paint see through the glass, appear quite shiny. Once mounted, your construction of the magic mirror within the triangle of the art is complete. Now look again at the diagram from the Goetia. It appears that a complete circle is drawn on the ground. It also appears that outside of the circle, the triangle is also drawn on the ground. I am sure that this will upset many grimoire purists, but the fact of the matter is that there is no need to draw a physical circle. Should you draw one, if it gives you more confidence or make you feel more secure, sure, go right ahead. But if you're good with your banishings, as the many months of practice while taking this course should have made you, it is enough. My personal experience and the experience of others proves this to be true. Why then are there complete instructions and figures in the diagram? Of course, the writer or copyist of the diagram is not here, so there is no way to be sure, but it appears to be merely a cover or blind to deceive any person into whose hands the document might willingly fall. And considering the small amount and number of people who have ever attempted the magic of this book against the larger number of people who own it, this blind has been very successful. To repeat, if you wish to draw the complete circle on the ground, go ahead. Those who do this usually use chalk. But if you have been following this course doing one lesson a month and have been doing the daily rituals, it is not necessary. Another consideration is that using the triangle of the art with its magic mirror while having it flat on the floor outside of your circle is absurdly difficult. However, placing it in this position assumes that the original artist was an expert at 3-dimensional representation. If you look at the copy of the original page, it is clearly shown that the artist has trouble with proportions and lines. It is not possible that the triangle was not meant to be flat on the floor. Early drawings of Christian figures frequently shown a disc behind the head of the religious figure. It is believed that this is meant to represent a halo. Since the artist did not have the development to show it surrounding the head, it is shown behind the head. It is a similar manner the artist of this work may have wished to show the correct shape and lettering of the triangle, however he or she did not have the necessary artistic knowledge or skill to show it in its proper position. The triangle of the art should be placed outside of the area where the circle will be formed. The triangle should be raised up so that the center of the mirror is at the eye level of the seer. More on this later. Obviously, if this is a chair for the seer, the triangle will be at a different height than if the seer stands. Although the triangle may hang straight up and down vertical, more commonly the top is made to lean back so that it is at an angle. This angle may be up to 45 degrees from vertical, but should be no more than this. To achieve this tilt, the triangle may be rested upon a chair, an artist's easel, or a music stand. Make sure that the triangle is firmly supported and will not fall over. The triangle should be placed east of where the circle will be formed, but quite close to the edge of where your circle will be. With this and your regular preparations, most of your physical preparations for using the magic of the Goetia is complete. Part 3. As I have shown, most forms of magic can be done by yourself. Indeed, most gray magical group workings have the group merely observing and adding their visualizations to that of the operator, the magician actually doing the work. But with the magic of evocation, this is different. Although it is possible to do evocation solo, it is very difficult. Many people trying to do this type of solo work achieve little to no success. Therefore, it is necessary to have a seer help you with the evocation. Or, if you're going to act as the seer, you would need another person to help perform the ritual. It is the seer's task to look into the mirror and see the being evoked. The seer then functions as an intermediary between the ritualist and the evoked entity. The ritualist or operator recites the callings which not only call the desired entity to the mirror, but also aid the seer in obtaining the vision necessary to see something in the mirror. If you are working with a group of people, your first trial at evocative magic should involve as the seer the person who has the most psychic sensitivity. Clues to this are ease at divinations which go far beyond the inherent limitations of the system used, i.e. extreme precision, divinations which prove correct on a very regular basis, a very detailed dream memory, a very strong emotional or over-emotional person, a daydreamer, etc. I hate to sound sexist, but because of this societal influences, the fact is that the best seers are usually women. If you have a person such as has been described in your group, be that person male or female, use that person as your seer in the first experiment. If not, try a volunteer. The worst thing that could happen is that your seer will see nothing. This will not necessarily be due to failure of your experiment, but rather because the seer does not have the adequate open psychic vision. For those of you who have been working solo, here is some very practical advice on how to find a seer. I'm giving this advice here, as placing an advertisement in your local paper for a seer is not advisable. The best place to seek a seer at your local occult bookstore or a supply shop. Simply hang out there for a while and look for people coming into the store who have interest in magic and divination. When you meet such a person, introduce yourself and ask such things as, do you do divinations? Are they usually correct? Do you have vivid dreams? Do you daydream frequently? If you are shy about meeting people, remember that you are not trying to pick someone up for a romantic situation. You are looking for a coworker. It should be clearly explained to the person if they are interested in working magically with you. If the person is interested, perform your daily work with him or her sitting in your circle and see how the person responds. If there seems to be a good working relationship possible between you, if your selected seer seems appropriate, it is time to tell the person what his or her preparations will be. On the facing page, you will see a drawing attributed to Saint Germain. On the left, there is a male seer peering into a goblet used as the magic mirror. The woman ritualist on the right holds a knife and a wand. They are surrounded by alchemical symbols, which is irrelevant to this discussion. There is a fire burning directly below the face of the seer. The inhalations of the smoke will cause a change in the blood chemistry of the seer. Also notice that it is possible that the ritualist is using the wand to hit the seer. This combination of pain and lack of oxygen combinations to alter the consciousness of the seer and allow him to more easily observe the sights within the magic mirror. There is no doubt that an alternate state of consciousness is a necessity for the seer. This can be accomplished in a number of ways. A mild state of self-hypnosis will suffice. If a person is not an alcoholic nor allergic to liquor, that person may be allowed to drink to a state of mild intoxication. There are many natural and synthetic drugs which will alter your consciousness, although I do not advocate the use of any drugs which is not specifically prescribed for you by a licensed doctor. It would be foolish of me to think that none of my students use what are known as recreational drugs. I am not going to describe their usage to alter your consciousness for magical purposes, because if you don't already know how they affect you, I am not going to suggest that you try them to find out. I will say that some people have told me of great success when they have chemicalized themselves. Ritualized induction, small amounts of pain, such as implied in the drawing, can also affect your consciousness. The small amounts of pain cause various hormones to flow throughout the bloodstream, and these hormones affect the brain-mind complex. There are drawings at least as far back as Pompeii showing ritual scourging. Some Wiccan groups use this as a part of certain of their rituals. Pain is part of spiritual practice in some shamanistic cultures. Even some very mainstream Christian sects have used hair shirts and self-flagellation. I personally am against this practice, but there are those who have found it effective. It It is believed that many of the visions seen by seers have been induced by the demon CO. Here, CO stands for carbon monoxide. The result of fires or incense used up the oxygen in a room. When using incense, always be sure to have fresh oxygen coming into the room through an open window or door. Still, the odor of the incense, especially if burned near the seer, can have a remarkable effect on the consciousness of this person. Sexual activity is another means of changing hormonal balances and affecting the brain-mind complex, but that will be discussed in another lesson. Still, another way to alter the consciousness is by denying sleep for several days. There are other methods too. You can probably think of several. In any event, allow the seer the choice of which methods he or she wishes to use to alter their consciousness. This person should have a medical exam first to be sure that nothing done could possibly damage the seer's health. Please note that none of the methods mentioned, if done with care, will hurt a healthy person. Further note that they have been done for thousands of years safely and are still being done in shamanistic cultures today. However, also note that nobody is forcing you to do anything. If you try to actually perform evocative magic using devices illegal or legal, neither the author, publisher, nor distributor of this course assume or will have any responsibility for your foolishness or disregard for the law and your health. The following rituals and explanations are presented as educational so that you can see what many people have done and what many people are doing. Should you decide to attempt such a ritual, all responsibility for your health is yours. Further, neither the author, publisher, nor distributor in any way condone the use of illegal substances nor the abuse or wrongful use of legal substances or drugs. With this word of warning, we will move on to the study of how to do rituals from the Goetia itself. Part 4. There are two other things which you need to obtain for this ritual other than your normal tools in the triangle of the art. The first is a set of 2 candle holders with stems long enough that they may be held by the seer while he or she looks into the magic mirror. Alternatively, you may obtain candle stands which reach the floor and are about 4 or more feet tall. Needless to say, the latter are far more expensive. If you do get the ones which can be handheld, make sure that they have big enough drip protectors so that the seer is not shocked by hot wax suddenly falling onto his or her hands. This will also help prevent you having to scrape wax off your floor or ironing it out of your carpet. The second necessary item is the seal of the entity you wish to evoke. For this, you must get a copy of the Goetia. Each seal represents and gives power to deal with an associated entity called a spirit. To determine which spirit is to call and which to seal to use, you will need to look through the book and see which powers each spirit offers. Let us say, for example, that you have reached a point in your life where you do wish to be bothered by other people and their problems. You want to be alone. This is the true meaning of invisibility when described in the grimoires. Invisibility does not mean that you will become transparent, but that others act as if you are not there. So looking through descriptions of the spirits, you find the name Baal, pronounced Baal. Baal is said to have the power to make it go invisible. He appears in diverse shapes, sometimes like a cat, sometimes like a toad, and sometimes like a man, and sometimes all these forms at once. He speaketh hoarsely. Further, we are told that the seal must be worn like a necklace by the seer, or else he, Baal, will not be homage. The seal of Baal looks like this. It may be made on paper as per the lesson on talismans. String needs to be attached so that it may go around the seer's neck, but it must be long enough that without removing the string from around his or her neck, the seer may pick it up and look at it. Set up the temple as usual. Place the triangle of the art outside the circle in the east. A chair may be placed in the east within the area of the circle for the seer if you feel that the seer may need it. Both of you should be robed and the seer should wear the seal. The 2 kandabla could be in the east or either side of the chair. if there is a chair, or to either side of the space where the seer will stand. These 2 candles should not be lit. You will also want a pencil or pen and some paper to write down any messages the seer may give you. The seer should be in the east of the circle facing east. There should be incense near the seer so that he or she will inhale much of the smoke. Performing the opening by watchtower. As you do, see that the seer should pay no attention to the ritual. It is the seer's task to stare at and contemplate the seal. Any method to alter the consciousness of the seer should already have begun, with the exception of self-hypnosis, which should wait until after the opening. If you have enough people, one should be assigned the task of making sure that incense is always flowing toward the seer. Make sure that when casting the circle, you walk outside the seer so that the seer is definitively within the magical circle. The operator should stand behind the seer and light or have someone light the seer's candles. Put the candles in the seer's hands. This will force the seer to drop the seal. Make sure that when it hangs down, the seal is facing out. If you are using floor-standing candelabra, tell the seer to let go the seal and stare into the magic mirror. Tell the seer in a smooth, comfortable voice. Stare deep into the mirror. Do not look at it, but into it. Move the candle so that you can see yourself, but so that you do not directly see the reflection of the candle's flames. Stare deeper, deeper, deeper. Now it's time to do the first conjuration. When a spirit's name is mentioned and is capitalized, you should use the appropriate name of the spirit you are evoking in place of, in this example, Baal. I do evocate and conjure thee, O spirit Baal, and being with power armed, from the supreme majesty I do strongly command thee, by Baronensis, Valdaciensis, Paumachia, and Apologiacides, by the most powerful princes Gaini, Lechide, and ministers of the Tordian abode, and by the chief priest of the Set of Apologia in the 9th Legion, I do evoke thee, and by evoking conjure thee. And by being armed with power from the supreme majesty, I do strongly command, by him who spake, and it was done, and unto whom all creatures be obedient, also I, being made after the image of God, imbued with the power from God, and created according into God's will, do exercise thee by that most mighty and powerful name of God, vibrate, El, strong, and wonderful, O thy spirit, by El, and I command thee by all the names of God, vibrate Adonai, El Elohim, Elonai, El Eheye, Shareya, Shatzbaot, Elian, Tetragrammaton Shaddai, Lord God Most High. I do exercise thee and do powerfully command thee, O thou spirit Baal, that art those forthwith appear to me here before this circle in a fair human shape, without any deformity or tortuosity, and by this imafeable name, Tetragrammaton Yud-He-Vav-He, do I command thee, at which being heard, the elements are overthrown, the air is shaken, the sea runneth back, the fire is quenched, the earth trembleth, and all of the hosts of celestial, terrestrial, and infernals do tremble together and are troubled and confounded. Wherefore come thou, spirit Baal, forthwith and without delay from any of all parts of the universe, whereas thou mayest be, and make rational answers unto all things that I shall demand thee. But come thou, peaceably, visibly, affably, now without delay manifestation that which I shall desire. For thou art conjured by the name of the living and true God, Hilarion. Wherefore, fulfill thy my command, persist thou therein into the end, according to mine interest, visibly and affably, speaking unto me with a voice clear and intelligible, without any ambiguity. You may repeat this as often as you wish. Pause after the conjuration and ask the seer if he or she sees anything in the mirror. If after a short pause the seer has no vision, you should repeat the conjuration. Although you may repeat it as much as you like, I have found that after 3 or 4 times my interest wanes. Then you should move on to the next conjuration. If the seer interrupts and claims seeing something in the mirror, finish the conjuration before going on to the questionings. However, if there is no appearance after the above first conjuration, go on to the second one as follows. I do evocate, conjure, and command thee, O thou spirit Baal, to appear and to show thyself visibly unto me before this simple and fair, homely shape, without any deformity or tortuosity, by the name and in the name vibrate Yah and Vav, which Adam heard and spoke, and by the name of God vibrate Aglah, which Lot heard and was saved by his family, and by the name vibrate Eot, which Jacob and was delivered from the hand of Esau, and his brother heard from the angel wrestling within him, by the name vibrate An Afahato, which Aaron heard and spake, and was made wise, and by the name vibrate Zabaot, which Moses named, and all the rivers were turned into blood, and by the name vibrate Ashir Yehe, O Ishton, which Moses named, and all the rivers brought forth frogs. And they ascended into the houses, destroying all things, by the name vibrate El On, which Moses named, and there was great hail, such as had not seen since the beginning of the world, by the name vibrate Adonai, which Moses named, and there came up locusts, which appeared upon the whole land, and devoured all things the hail had left, and by the name vibrate Shema Ahmadeha, which Joshua called upon, and the sun stayed its course, and by the name Alpha and Omega, which Daniel named and destroyed Baal and slew the dragon, and in the name vibrate Abmanuel, which the three children Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego sang in the midst of the fiery furnace and were delivered, and by the name vibrate Nagios, and by the throne of vibrate Adonai, and by vibrate Ishkeros, Astaatos, Parakletos, and vibrate Otheos, Iktros, and Thanatos, and by three secret names vibrate Aglaon, Tetragrammaton, do I abjure and conjure thee. And by these names, and all by all the other names of the living and true God, the Lord Almighty, I do exercise and command thee, O Spirit Baal, even by God, who spake the word, and it was done, and to whom all creatures are obedient, and by the dreadful judgment of God, and by the uncertain sea of glass, which before the divine majesty, might and powerful, by the four beasts before the throne, having eyes before and behind, by the fire around the throne, by the holy angels of heavens, and by the mighty wisdom of God, I do potently exercise thee, that thou appearest here before this circle to fulfill my will in all things which shall seem good unto me, by the name Bashta Ta'ebaldeka, and by this name vibrate Prim Ummata, which Moses named, and the earth opened and did swallow up Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Wherefore thou shalt make a faithful answers unto all my demands, O Spirit Baal, and shalt perform all my desires as far as in thine office thou art capable thereof. Wherefore come thou visibly, peacefully, affably, now without delay, to manifest that which I desire, speaking with a clear and perfect voice, intelligible and to mine understanding. Again, ask the seer if he or she sees anything in the mirror. If the answer is yes, proceed to the questioning. If not, you may repeat the second conjuration, or any of those that follow in the grimoire. You may also chant the name of the spirit you are trying to contact over and over as if it were a mantra. This is especially effective if you have a group of 10 or more people. Although there are many more conjurations in the Goetia, it has been my experience that the first two will more than suffice. Yet after reciting them 3 times each, with no result, it is not fair to conclude you are not going to have any luck, that the seer is not capable of learning anything at this time. If the seer informs you that he or she does see something, but is unclear, everyone should chant the name of the spirit until the seer sees the vision is clear. Once it is clear, proceed on to the questioning. The questioning. 1. The first question to ask is directed toward the seer. Simply ask, what do you see in the mirror? If the seer says nothing or gives no reply, repeat one of the evoking conjurations. If the seer describes a scene, write down what is reported with the paper and writing implement which was put in the circle for this purpose. If the seer describes an entity, see if it matches the description in the grimoire you are using. In the case of Baal, he normally appears as a cat, toad, man, or all 3 at once. If the entity appears in a shape so unusual or weird as will sometimes happen that the seer is frightened or upset, say loudly, in all firm voice, I do evocate, conjure, and command thee, O third spirit Baal, to show thyself in a fair and comely shape without any deformity or tortuosity, by the name and powers of Vibrate, Eheya, Ashur, Eheye, and Yud He Vav He Elohim. When recited, the figure should change appearance. If it does not, immediately give the license to depart, which is given later in this lesson, and thoroughly banish the area, for the wrong entity has appeared as a result of your magic. If the spirit is of pleasant appearance or takes on such an appearance at your command, move on to step 2. 2. Ask the spirit, "What is thy name?" The seer should respond by saying, "I feel his name is blank," or "He says his name is blank," followed by the spirit's name. You will find that the entities we deal with do not lie. However, they do not always give a full answer or one that is intelligible to you. As an example of this, they may give another name by which they are known or may simply refuse to answer. If this should happen, say, by the powers of, vibrate and spell out the letters with your LBRP dagger in the air and visualize the letters in light blue. Yud He Vav He. I command you to tell us your true name without hesitation or equivocation. At this time you should get the correct reply. If the spirit gives its name as being the one you are seeking to contact, continue to the welcome below. If not, give the license to depart and thoroughly banish the area. The welcome onto the spirit. Welcome, O most noble spirit Baal. I say thou art welcome unto me because I have called thee through God whom hast created heaven and earth and all that is in them contained, and because also thou hast obeyed the will of God and mine own by appearing here now. By that same power by which I have called thee forth, I bind thee for a time that thou remain affably and visibly here before this circle and within this triangle, so long as I shall have occasion for thy presence, and not to depart without my license until thou hast duly and faithfully performed my will without any falsity. Now standing behind the seer, point the dagger used in the LBRP directly at the triangle outside the circle and say, "By the power of God, I call thee, give unto me a true answer." Now state what it is you desire of the entity you have summoned. In the case of Baal, you would ask, "What are the secrets of invisibility?" Have the seer tell you anything and everything the spirit says, points towards or does, and copy what seer says on the paper you have brought for that purpose. Once this part of the evocation is complete, give out loud the license to depart. O thou spirit Baal, because thou hast diligently answered unto my demands, and hast been very ready and willing to come at my call, I do here license thee to depart unto thy proper place. Go now in peace to thy abodes and habitations, causing neither harm nor danger unto humans or beasts. Depart then, I say, and be thou very ready to come at my call, when duly conjured by the sacred rites of magic. I charge thee to withdraw peacefully and quietly, and may the peace of God be ever continued between thee and me, so mote it be. Finish the ritual with the closing by Watchtower. It is not necessary to have a seer. You can act as the seer yourself. However, it is much easier to have a seer so that one of you can perform the ritual while the other concentrates on the magic mirror. Also, you have probably noticed that I did not tell you the appropriate incense to use, nor the appropriate time to do this ritual, nor the appropriate color symbolism. There is an important reason for this, because the purpose of this course is not to make you sort of familiar with magic. It is not to have you read and be somewhat familiar with stocks of books on the subject. It is the purpose of this course to make you a practicing magician. Should you merely be able to follow books, you will never be more than what a hack writer is to literature, and frankly, a few Hemingways, Le Gons, and Cervantes are worth 1,000 formula novelists. This is not to say that there isn't a place for redundant romance novels or comic book magicians. There is, but it is not what I hope this course will produce. Yes, the time this ritual is performed is important, the color symbolism is important, the choice of incense is important, but at this time I leave it to you to figure it out. Go back over these lessons and you should have no problem doing so. As a hint, compare what the spirit can offer you with the talismanic magic chart. From there, you should be able to get the planet and Sephiroth. The rest should be obvious. If it is not, start this entire course over, for you have not really understood the information presented here. The Goetia has the seal's names and descriptions of 72 different spirits, each having various talents and powers which can be shared with you. Much of this book, it is sad to say, has picked up the junk and excretions of centuries of repression and stupidity. Some sections of the Goetia refer to other books of the Lesser Key of Solomon, of which the Goetia is but one. Unfortunately, there is only one known source for the complete Lesser Key, and it is rather expensive and of poor quality. However, with instructions in this course and the commonly available editions of the Goetia, you can have virtually years of practical work and experimentation. The most commonly available version of the title, The Lesser Key of Solomon Goetia, the Book of Evil Spirits. This title, however, is quite misleading, for in this book you are dealing with energies, or forces which take on a type of personality, but they have no more evil forces than electricity. Another force is good or evil. Even though evil is not a question in this particular instance, karma is. Even something which superficially seems to be positive may lead to karmatic negative actions. So before acting on the advice of any Goetic spirit, be sure to do a divination in order to be positive that you will not be performing any magic or actions which would unknowingly lead to deleterious results. Since this is not a course in Goetic magic, I will not be giving you 72 examples, one for each spirit. Rather, at this time, I again urge you to obtain a copy of the book and simply follow the pattern given in the ritual above. Replace the name Baal with the name of the spirit from the Goetia you wish to evoke. Use the appropriate seal as given in that text until you can obtain a copy of the book, or if you merely wish to try out some Goetic magic and see if it appeals to you, in the following pages are a few samples of Goetic spirits, their seals, descriptions, and purposes. Above is the seal of the spirit Amen. Amen is great in power and is also said to be very stern. He looks like a wolf with the tail of a serpent and breath of fire. At the command of the magician, Amen will change to look like a man with a raven's head. Sometimes there are dog's teeth, i.e. fangs, in the head of this raven. Amen will give you information on all things past and things yet to be. Having a neutral nature, he can help reconcile differences between friends. However, he can also cause feuds. Needless to say, care must be taken in asking for what you desire of Amen. Above is the seal of the spirit Beur. Beur should be evoked during the astrological sign of Sagittarius and appears as a centaur. He teaches science philosophy, including such things as mathematics, ethics, logic, and physics. His specialty is teaching the secret magical and medical knowledge and powers of herbs and plants. He also has healing powers, especially over psychological pain. Below is the seal of the spirit Botis. At first he will appear as an ugly viper, but on the command of the magician changes into the shape of a man with great teeth, fangs again, 2 horns, and carrying a sword of exquisite sharpness and brightness. When invoked, he can offer things similar to Amen. Note the similarity with the change of appearance with the fangs. Botis is said to tell all things from past and those things yet to be. He can also reconcile disagreements between friends and foes. As an historical document, the Goetia is fascinating. Several spirits are nothing more than deities of earlier cultures. Thus the spirit Astaroth is nothing more than a form of the goddess of Astaroth, also known as Astarte and Isis. Revealing a Judo-Christian paternal bias, the spirit Astaroth becomes a male. This certainly helps to validate the sociological theory that the gods and goddesses of any culture becomes the demons of the following culture. And with the church's influence, even goddesses become male demons. I recently saw a program on television wherein the studio was decorated to appear as a cave. The speaker was putting forth some bizarre hysteria about how a fantasy role-playing game was resulting in demon possession and people leaving Christianity. Since this program was on a religious, i.e. Christian network, the purpose of this program had to be only to appeal to the paranoia of those who already believe in the form of Christianity. However, another Christian writer, theologian, and radio philosopher says that Christians cannot be demon-possessed. Therefore, this TV program represented a philosophy not even in accord with other Christian apologists. Of course, one good way to keep large numbers of people under your control is to keep instilling fear into them. This seems to be a major function of Christian broadcasting. In an event, I disagree totally with the TV program's content as being nothing more than an irrationalist, fear-inducing paranoid superstitious. To be fair, much of occultism is also hidden in the stupidity of paranoia and superstition. A recent book I read on occult topics used the National Enquirer as a Hare Krishna magazine as sources for information. And even if the author did not understand that the National Enquirer is not necessarily considered an example of journalistic excellence, he should have checked for other sources too. He also should have realized that the Hare Krishna magazine would present things in order to make their organization look good, truth, and reality notwithstanding. So I repeat here, do not take my word or anyone else's word for anything in occultism. Check it out for yourself and do your research. Beyond Fortune said there is no room for authority on occultism. In reference to occult studies, this was sensibly put in a bumper sticker with simply read, "Question authority." By now you might be thinking, what does all this have to do with magical evocation and the Goetia? Well, I want to tell you that I like to think that I am not paranoid, but I have in my possession some things which scares me, although I doubt demon possession is the result of playing simple fantasy role-playing games. I have a similar game, which features evocation from the Goetia, playing pieces which have nothing less than a miniature version of the seals of the spirits from the Goetia itself. Although this game has had a rather small circulation and certainly gives no danger to trained occultists, it could be a problem for a person who has latent magical abilities and spends some time looking at the game pieces. That type of person with no magical training or protective preparations could be quite shocked upon seeing a weird figure in a reflective surface. Such a scare could hurt an unknowing person's psyche and grasp on reality. A fear also that people may become obsessed with certain thoughts and ideas, whether they be along occultic, magical, or other lines. For a person magical trained such as you are if you have been following the teachings of this course so far, obsessions or possessions is not a problem. For untrained, however, easily influenced people, care is needed. That is why I hope that copies of this game I possess receive no further circulation than what has already been done. With this, we end our study of the Goetia. Before moving on to another book of evocational material, I'd like to pause and share another ritual of protection. The focus of this course has been on modern Kabbalistic theory, what I have somewhat facetiously called the WASP Kabbalah. This system is based on earlier mystical Judaic traditions, which in turn have been based on even earlier Semitic, pre-Semitic, and non-Semitic sources. In contradistinction to the WASP Kabbalah is what I have called the Kosher Kabbalah, a Kabbalistic philosophy which has eschewed many later influences which had de-Jewified Kabbalistic tradition. I am personally delighted to see a growing Jewish Kabbalistic resurgence in both the West and Middle East. It is hoped that as a result, many previously rare and untranslated or poorly translated texts will become available to imperfect students such as myself. As an example of this need, one of the most important Kabbalistic magical texts, a book on talismans known as the Sefer Ratziel, to my knowledge has not been translated into English. I searched and found a Hebrew copy of it at the University of Judaism in Los Angeles, California. It was about 60 years old and in poor condition. The type used was somewhat dissimilar to the style most commonly used today. That, along with printing which cut off portions of letters, made the book impossible for me to try and translate. Another important book not yet translated is by the famous Rabbi Isaac Luria. It is called The Revolution of Souls, and is about reincarnation. Much of his theory has been presented in these lessons which I learned from secondhand sources. Perhaps some true scholar of a mystical bent will try his or her hand at the necessary task of translating these two books as well as many of the others which sit in waiting for a time when they may illuminate the world. The reason I am again talking about the Kosher Kabbalah is that many people have asked me if there are any uniquely kosher Kabbalistic rituals. Of course, there are. and I have recently found a good protective ritual of this sort. It is based totally on Jewish sources, and most importantly on the Sefer Yetzirah. In the Sefer Yetzirah, we are told that God sealed the various directions of space with various permutations of 3 letters of the ultimate name, those 3 letters being Yud He Vav. Using this as a basis, I present a ritual which can be used in place of the Rose Cross ritual. I call it the Yetziratic sealing rite. This rite requires only a candle of purest white, a stick of incense, and a match or lighter. Step 1. Face east, and light the candle on the table or altar which is before you. Now hold the fingers of the hands in 3 groups each. The little finger and ring finger are together. The middle finger and index finger are together. And the thumb is by itself. It is the traditional hand position of blessing used by the Jewish high priests. See figure below. Hold your hands as if blessing the candles and say, "Blessed art thou, O Lord, vibrate Yud He Vav He, ruler of the universe, who hath consecrated and commanded us to kindle the sacred lights." Step 2. Take the incense in your right hand and light it from the flame of the candle. While it is still flaming, say, "Let the whole universe know that the one God who is my God is vibrate Yud He Vav He," and blow out the incense so that it only smokes. Step 3a. Look up. Say, "I seal the heights with vibrate Yud He Vav." Step 3b. Look down and say, "I seal the abyss with vibrate Yud Vav He," spelling the letters with the incense shown on the screen. Step 3c. Looking forward to the east, say, "I seal the east with He Yud Vav," again spelling the letters that are on the screen. In a similar manner, vibrate and spell the words in the following actions. Step 3d. In a clockwise direction, turn 180 degrees to the west and say, "I seal the west with Ye Vav Yud," showing the letters on the screen. Step 3e. Turn clockwise 270 degrees to the south. Say, "I seal the south with Vav Yud He," showing the letters on the screen. Step 3f. Turn clockwise 180 degrees to the north and say, "I seal the north with Vav He Yud," showing the letters on the screen. Step 4. Turn clockwise 90 degrees back to the east. Reassume the position of priestly blessing as in step 1 and say, "In this way does the microcosm repeat the macrocosm, and the whole world is blessed. Hallelujah, hallelujah, Selah, 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 Amen, Amen, and Amen." Step 5. You may now abide in the peace for as long as you wish. Part 5. The Greater Key of Solomon is readily available at metaphysical bookstores and occult shops. It is fascinating that many occultists claim that the Lesser Key deals with evil spirits and the Greater Key deals with good spirits. This is merely a repetition of what other ill-informed writers have claimed. There is not one bit of proof that one key deals with evil spirits and the other deals with good spirits. The Greater Key is divided into 2 major sections or books. The second of these books describe the various tools or weapons of the magician, including several which do not seem appropriate for the practice of high magic at all. But this is necessary, as the first book of the Greater Key is a combination of high and low magic methods. As an example of the later, the Greater Key includes a method of making oneself invisible using a small image of yellow wax in the form of a man. This type of image magic, sometimes called palpet magic, is not in the repertoire of most Kabbalistic magicians. This is far more in the realm of natural or low magic. It is because there are natural magical methods in this grimoire, along with the lack of appeals to Jesus and the Trinity, which gives eternal evidence of an earlier date for the Greater Key than the Lesser Key. In fact, the earliest written version of the Greater Key date from the 15th or 16th centuries, while the earliest copies of the Lesser Key are from the 17th century. Of course, oral versions of both of the books may go back much further, and earlier manuscript forms of these books may still be discovered. This did happen with a grimoire called the Picatrix, which has never been translated into English. It was thought to be a typical example of writing from the Middle Ages. Recent discoveries show it to be a translation of a much earlier Arabic work. Naturally, it is not my desire to recopy the entire Greater Key of Solomon here. However, the evocational conjurations are similar in form to those of the Lesser Key as given earlier this lesson. Thus, you could use the evocations from the Lesser Key by changing the phrase Spirit Baal as in the earlier example. For angel so, and I know that this may infuriate some purists, but the techniques and philosophy are the same. If you want to drag yourself through 5 single-spaced pages of evocation such as are given in the Greater Key, you may be my guest. In the Greater Key, we are again confronted with a puzzle to our understanding, a puzzle obviously created to fool those without training. Between books 1 and 2 of the Greater Key is a section filled with pentacles, and how they can bring you various powers and abilities. This seems to imply that they are actually talismans. However, if you go through book 1 and actually study the evocations, you will see that the magician is told to show the pentacles to the spirit which appears and demand all that he shall wish from the king of spirits. As you can see, implying that these symbolic figures are talismans is a cover to prevent their true potential from falling into the hands of the untrained and unprepared. Below is a pentacle associated with the sun. Its purpose is to free you from thought patterns which keep you from achieving your desires. The evocation should be done on the day and in the hour of the sun. If so done, the entity which appears will tell you how to break your mental bonds and be free. In your evocation, use the term Lord Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh instead of Spirit Baal. Below is a pentacle for controlling the spirits of Venus. It would be good for any of the purposes listed under Venus on the talismanic magic chart. You should want to use the name of the appropriate archangel instead of Spirit Baal. Invoke the spirit of Venus, the archangel amongst others, and ask of it that you will as if appropriate to the planet. Of course, do the evocation during the hour of Venus and if possible on the day of Venus. On top of the next page is another pentacle associated with Venus. Its purpose is to invoke the spirit Yonel. To give you information on how to obtain grace and honor, Yonel comes from the Hebrew outside central figure Yud, Vav, Nun, Aleph, and Lamed. Finally, the pentacle below is another one of Venus. Its purpose is to learn from the angel Monoshiel how to attract love. I wish to reiterate here that magical evocation is not just working with your fantasies and imaginations, neither is it a type of spiritism which seeks contact with any dead souls or entities which happen to be nearby. Rather, it is a very real method of making contact with entities on a higher level of existence. They are always there. It is usually we who are not aware of them. In magical evocations, we not only become aware of them, but choose whom of the myriad of entities available we desire to contact. In the Greater Key, we obtain some special information which is not in the Lesser Key, and we can assume that it is specifically for the use with the Greater Key entities. Then, when doing evocations from the Greater Key, there is a slightly different method for using the pentacle. After using the pentacle to focus your attention, don't confuse this with your magical tool, the Earth Pentacle. Cover the pentacle so that it cannot be seen. Usually a piece of black silk is used for this purpose. Then, when the entity appears in your magic mirror, show the pentacle to the entity. The result is that the entity will be bound by your will. We will use this technique in a similar way, but for another purpose in a later lesson. Before going on to another aspect of evocation magic, there is another book I wish to mention in passing. This is a book which was appropriately used as a source book by a branch of the Golden Dawn known as the Alpha and Omega. The name of the book, which was translated by Mathers, is The Grimoire of Armadale. This unusual book, though still in print, is mostly ignored by magicians because they do not understand or dare not to try the magic or evocations. Its internal structure, references to Jesus throughout the book, indicates a later work than the Greater Key. In fact, some of the names of spirits in this book seem to be similar to those of both the Lesser and the Greater Key, and another work known as the Arbatel of Magic. The seals or sigils in the Grimoire of Armadale are far more involved than most other works of this genre. Unless you buy the book and work to understand it, they are rather unusable. This book does not even bother to give you outrageous methods to draw a magic circle. Rather, it merely says to see the circle be correctly formed according to the instructions we have elsewhere given. The meanings of the seals and the purposes for using them are hidden in obscure language. After reading this lesson, you should be able to discern the meanings and see through the veils to the uninitiated. If you do buy or already have this book, simply remember that the purpose of evocative magic is to allow yourself to see into the astral plane and communicate with entities who can answer questions and give instructions according to their nature. Although the Grimoire of Armadale does not have instructions on how to make magical circle, it does have the same kind of protective rituals and conjurations as given in other grimoires of this very nature, such as the Greater Key and Lesser Keys. Curiously, this book also has some heavenly disguised information on sex magic towards the end. There will be more on sex magic in a later lesson. Part 6. Unless you are totally new to magic and occultism, you probably have never heard of it. Entities known as elementals. And if you have a little more knowledge, you probably know that there are different types of elementals, each type associated with a different element. The elemental spirits of earth are the gnomes, the elemental spirits of air are the sylphs, the elemental spirits of water are the undies, and the elemental spirits of fire are the salamanders. These natural elementals are quite unique. Here on the physical plane, everything is made of combinations of elements, but the elementals are totally composed of only one element. Thus, they can rarely be seen on this plane except within their element. Salamanders can sometimes be seen weaving around a roaring fire. Sylphs can sometimes be seen as sparkles in the air on a clear day. The proper place for describing entities whose main appearance is on the other planes will come in another lesson. Further, the length of this course does not allow time for learning to do magic with the aid of the elementals. However, there is something which uses a creation similar to elementals and which forms an important part of your magical curriculum. It is known as the creation of artificial elementals. An artificial elemental is something which you, by force of will and magical techniques, create to do your will. In a sense, this is a type of evocation. Another way of looking at artificial elements is that they are a type of talismanic magic without the talisman. And you already know how to make artificial elements. An artificial elemental combines the force of a particular element with a will or direction created by yourself. Thus, if two of your friends were having a disagreement, you might wish to send them a bit of elemental water to cool them off. Here are the combining elemental water with the purpose of calm friends. Perhaps if you have a boyfriend or girlfriend who, to your mind, is not amorous enough, sending that person some fire element to increase their adore purpose might do the trick. Similar, if you are a manager with a lazy employee, sending some fire element to increase the employee's productivity purpose could be what is needed to encourage the employee. An artificial elemental also has a type of rudimentary consciousness of a sense of purpose. That is what you instill in it, as will be explained. Much as cruising a missile will move around the object in order to find its target, so too will an artificial elemental discover ways of achieving the goal you give it. It means that the amount of elemental energy you give it may not be equal to the task you assign it. If the energy is too little, the artificial elemental will not succeed in achieving its goal. If you give it more elemental energy than it needs, and do not tell it how to discharge that excess energy once the goal has been reached, an artificial element can become an unthinking and sometimes uncontrollable elemental force, sending out its undirected energy at anything and anyone, including its creator. Therefore, when making an artificial elemental for a particular purpose, you should pay close attention to the following rules. 1. You should have firmly in your mind what you want the artificial elemental to do. 2. You should not have the artificial elemental affect another person without that person's permission. In the above situation, A. Employees tacitly give approval for managers to affect them to encourage their productivity. B. The person was already a boyfriend or girlfriend, and thus what you would be doing would be to strengthen something already in existence. You are not affecting a new or unknown person. You are not affecting the outcome of the argument, merely calming the emotions associated with it so that the two can more easily settle the differences between them. 3. Since this is a type of gray magic, you must first perform a divination to see if the outcome of the magical act would be positive or negative. 4. As part of the magical process, the artificial elemental must be given the command to disperse all energy with harm to no one when it achieves its goal or by a certain date and time. Ritual for the creation of an artificial elemental. Step 1. Decide on the purpose and do a divination to determine the outcome. If it is positive, proceed to Step 2. Step 2. Perform the opening by Watchtower. Step 3. Imagine that you are the element in which you wish to form into an artificial elemental. Instructions for this are in earlier lessons of this course. Hold your hands 9 to 12 inches apart, palms facing each other. Now imagine a bottle or box between your hands. Next, as you exhale, visualize all of the element you are working with going out with your breath and being trapped in the container between your hands. Do this until the container is literally bursting with elemental energy. Step 4. Take your hands away and let the container float in front of you. Pick up the tool associated with the element with which you are working. Put the end of the tool against the visualized container. Say, I hereby name thee blank. Go thou and do such and such. When you have completed this task, disperse and reunite with name of element, everywhere and harm none of your way. If thou hast not completed thy task by date and time, then disperse nonetheless and reunite with name of element, everywhere and harm none on your way. So mote it be on thy way. Step 5. Perform the closing by Watchtower. Notes. 1. For a name, you can use anything. It can be a common person's name or totally made up. However, it should apply to the purpose of the artificial element. Calling an artificial fire elemental water bearer is not appropriate. 2. You can add the name to the words of the right above. Thus, the above ritual can be expanded to include go thou, name of artificial elemental, and do such and such. 3. In the space marked such and such, name the purpose of creating the artificial elemental. Examples include go thou and bring peace to my friends, or go thou and bring greater ardor to my lover, etc. 4. When giving a date and time for dispersion, it is best to give astronomical dates rather than dates invented by humans. So, rather than saying Tuesday at 4 p.m., it would be better to say when the sun is at its highest on the day of the next full moon. Even the more complex, on the next day of Mars when the sun is halfway between its highest point and its setting, would be good. This lapse phrase means Tuesday, the day of Mars, at some time between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m., depending upon the time of year. 5. Although an artificial elemental has a type of consciousness, it is no more alive than a computer with which you play chess. Therefore, there is nothing ethically wrong with creating an imprisoned artificial elemental. These are frequently used as protective devices. They may be put into something solid or something which is hollow but seal. This may be the source of the genie in the bottle myth. To do this, you would change the second line of the evocation above to say, go thou into this state vast rock, etc., and do such and such and such. If you are using a vase or bottle, which can be sealed, leave it open until after you see or sense that the artificial elemental has entered the bottle. Then quickly and securely seal the container. An example of such a protective artificial elemental would be based on the elemental fire and would have the purpose of creating the fiery emotions of fear and paranoia in any who would seek to intrude without permission of honorable intent. Be sure to give it a dispersal date and time, and if your container is hollow, open it at the date and time to allow the imprisoned artificial elemental to disperse. Part 7. I have already discussed the differences between evocation and invocation and how invocational magic is the basis for spiritism. The way a spiritist does an invocation, becomes a medium for an entity claiming to be the spirit of someone deceased, is surprising. 1. The magician protects himself or herself with the appropriate banishing, etc. The spiritist does not. 2. The magician prepares to allow one particular entity to unite and control the magician's consciousness, The spiritist allows anything which is hanging around to enter. 3. The magicians tend to doubt what they are told by non-physical entities. It took Crowley years before he fully accepted the responsibility of the Book of the Law. Many spiritists tend to accept anything which comes from the other side. Invocational magic, as done by ceremonial magicians, follows a straightforward pattern. 1. Banishings and purifications. 2 and 3. Calling on a particular entity and using the words which have dual purpose of loosening, not loosing, the control of the subconsciousness and allowing this other entity to take over for a time. 4. The identification of the entity. 5. Comments of the entity and questioning the entity. 6. Release of the entity returning to normal consciousness. 7. Final banishings. Ceremonial magic invocations are actually too advanced to spend the space fully explaining a ritual invocation in this introductory course. But although I am not going to actually give a ritual for invocation, I will be showing you how to do one according to the patterns given above. With study and practice, you should be able to construct your own invocational rituals. 1. For banishings and purifications, the best method I use, of course, is the opening by Watchtower. 2 and 3. To call on a particular entity requires a vast knowledge of that particular entity. Very frequently, the entities chosen are gods from various pantheons, archangels, or spirits from various grimoires. You must learn all you can about that particular entity, invoking, including the physical positions of any in which the entity is most frequently visualized. Visualizing yourself in the position is known as assuming a god form. Appropriate colors and scents should also be around, and poetry or song, and even dance dedicated to the entity should be performed. Sometimes, words, which are fairly meaningless to us, are repeated over and over like a mantra. These are frequently and wrongfully called the barbarous names of evocation. Together, this combination of calling a particular entity and using devices to alter the consciousness of the magician produces a condition which allows an entity to temporarily displace the consciousness of the particular magician. 4. Next, the magician will identify himself or herself as the entity. The speech pattern and appearance of the magician may alter at this time. 5. The invoked entity may give comments to those assembled. As with evocational magic, invocational rituals are group acts. Others are needed to take notes or ask questions of the invoked entity. It will later be up to all the people present whether or not they wish to follow the advice of this entity. The group may also wish to ask questions of the entity in order to prove the identity of the entity. This method is explained earlier in this lesson. 6. Since the chosen entity is from a non-physical plane of existence, it will not wish to stay for long. Sometimes an additional rite is added here. This rite will be discussed in the next lesson. Then the entity will freely choose to go, and the magician's normal consciousness will automatically return. During the entire ritual, from after the opening by Watchtower, the earth pentacle, a sign of the physical plane, should be covered with a thin black cloth, preferably of silk. If the entity does not leave as quickly as desired, or as if I have seen happen, if people in the circle start to have a bad reaction from the extraterrestrial contact, unveil the pentacle and show it to the eyes of the magician invoked entity. It will depart to its own abodes. Also give the license to depart, as in evocational rituals. During the time with the non-physical entity, it's invoked, the consciousness of the magician is not simply gone, rather one of two things happen. It may stay on the astral plane near the body of the magician, otherwise it may go throughout the astral plane. Sometimes the consciousness of the magician may be other entities on the astral plane, and the report of experiences by the magician during this period may be of more value to the group than the actual invocation. 7. Do the closing by Watchtower. There are many beautiful versions of this type of ritual given in sources both pagan and ceremonial. One of my favorites is an invocation to a deity which came before creation, and thus was not created. In the words of invocation, the entity is bornless. Listen to the words of the calling. Thee I invoke the bornless one, thee that didst create the earth and the heavens, thee that didst create the night and day, thee that didst create the darkness and the light. Thou hast distinguished between the just and the unjust. Thou didst make the female and the male. Thou didst produce the seed and the fruit. Thou didst form the men to love one another. This is followed by a long section of barbarous names, which is meant to be repeated over and over, although it is not mentioned that you are supposed to do so until the bornless one takes over. The best way to allow this to happen is to inflame thyself with prayer. Finally, the magician's personality leaves and the bornless one identifies himself. I am he, the bornless spirit, having sight in the feet, strong and the immortal fire. I am he, the truth. I am he who hateth that evil should be wroth in this world. I am he that lighteneth and thundereth. I am he from whom is the shower of the life of earth. I am he whose mouth overflameth. I am he, the begetter and manifester unto the light. I am he, the grace of the world. Is that not beautiful? Versions of it can be found in the Lesser Key of Solomon, Goetia, and in Crowley's Magick in Theory and Practice. The reason I am not presenting an invocational ritual in full is not because it is dangerous. If you have practiced the rituals given so far in this course and follow the instructions given, you will have no problem. What I wish to present to you is the idea that rituals are not static and unchanging. Is there are entities you wish to invoke? Do the research on that entity, learn all you can about the entity. Find poetry dedicated to the entity or write some yourself. To be successful, you must become totally involved with that god, archangel, or spirit, and then you must truly want the entity to come to you. To do this, you must inflame thyself with prayer aimed toward that particular entity. I want to give you as much information as possible in this course. With evocation and invocation, this task is rather incomplete. This is because the very nature of magical evocation requires the use of other books, and the nature of invocations requires a great ideal of work on your own. Although these types of magic are very dramatic, you can be a successful magician and never use them. If you do desire to practice these techniques, you'll have to purchase the appropriate books or do the necessary work. Remember, one of the goals of this course is to allow you to pick up any book on magic and be able to understand it and work its system. Had I not told you the inner secrets of magical evocation and invocation, a great quantity of books might not have been as clear to you as they could be. Thus, this lesson serves its purpose. The instructions on how to create an artificial elemental are a more complete set of magical instructions. You now know how to create an artificial elemental for any purpose you desire, although the ritual looks short. In fact, it requires much time and effort. It requires that you know the material in the 8 previous lessons of this course. You need to know the correspondences with the elementals. You need to know the Watchtower ritual, which means that you need to know the pentagram and hexagram rituals. You need to know how to generate elemental energy, which also requires the knowledge of elemental pore breathing. In short, this course is cumulative. I cannot stress this too much. To achieve success in magic requires dedication to study and practice. If you want to talk about magic, I think you will enjoy this entire course. If you want to be a magician, a real practice, you must practice the exercises and techniques and rituals given within these lessons. There is no secret pill or formula to become a wizard overnight. Now is the time to get to work if you not have already done so. The following is a review for the questions for Lesson 9. The following questions are designed to help you determine if you have mastered the information in Lesson 9. Please try to answer them without looking at the text. The answers are in Appendix 2. 1. According to Dion Fortune, entities are evoked to what level and who can see the evoked entities? 2. According to tantric belief, for how many minutes does semen retain its magical value after ejaculation? 3. What is the difference between invocation and evocation? 4. What type of magic is difficult to work by yourself? 5. Who is the demon CO? Why is this demon dangerous? 6. In an evocation, what is the first question to be asked? 7. In an evocation, what is the second question to be asked? 8. What does the spirit Amen look like? 9. Who is the ultimate authority in magical matters? 10. How many directions are sealed in the Yetzirah sealing rite? 11. What are the names of the 4 types of elemental spirits and why are they unique? 12. List the 7 steps in magical evocations. The following questions only you can answer. 1. If you have been doing magic so far some time before studying the lessons in this book, did the information on the truth about evocations surprise you? 2. Are you still doing rituals, keeping your daily entries? 3. Do you go back and occasionally study earlier lessons in this course? 5. Have you ever attempted an evocation? Will you in the future? Do you have some of the other source books, such as the various grimoires, needed to do such evocation? If not, do you plan to get them? 5. Can you do the Watchtower ritual by heart yet?